This inmate confessed to a crime that another man was convicted of later. I'm sure we've all seen the film The Shawshank Redemption, and, spoiler alert, the protagonist puts himself in a precarious situation that lists him as the prime suspect in his own wife's murder, which later leads to him becoming convicted of his wife's murder. But then another inmate at a different prison was revealed to have boasted about murdering the protagonist's wife. However, as the mantra goes, art mimics life and not the other way around, and Hollywood is certainly no exception to this rule in the realm of art. Welcome back to Dark Narratives. My name is Ben. Today's case is one that I think is going to really have everyone thinking a lot about the American justice system, the way evidence is gathered and presented in court, and question the efficacy and efficiency of the justice system. This crime in particular is going to take us back to the 1980s, back when DNA evidence was never used but collected and home security cameras were never as popular as they are today, nearly 40 years later. Last but not least, this one will have you questioning the validity of witness and more particularly inmate testimony. Without further ado, let us begin. Today, we are in the city of Rochester, New York, the third most populated city in New York State. You might be wondering what are some good reasons to visit this city. Well, for starters, we have the cultural attractions. Visitors can explore the Strong National Museum of Play, which features interactive exhibits on toys, games, and video games, or visit the George Eastman Museum, where they can learn more about photography through various exhibitions showcasing work from world-renowned artists. Then we have the food scene. Being situated close enough by Lake Ontario allows access to fresh seafood while also having culinary ties towards nearby buffalo chicken wings, making Rochester an excellent place to experience diverse food ranging from street vendors selling hot dogs and burgers all the way up to Michelin star restaurants serving the finest cuisine around. And if you're a historical music fan, throughout the year, there are several festivals taking place in the downtown area, celebrating different cultures' music genres, among other themes, with the most notable of them being Xerox International's Jazz Festival, attracting thousands of visitors every summer. Overall, Rochester boasts something for everyone, whether it be culture-seeking tourists looking at museums or art galleries, or food lovers craving diverse cuisine options, or anyone simply wanting to enjoy great company while experiencing what this wonderful city has to offer. In the suburb of Brightford, which is located on the outskirts of Rochester, we find the Krauseneck family. The picture of the perfect American dream family in the early 1980s. A hardworking father by the name of James with an absolutely beautiful and wonderful wife, Kathleen, and their 3.5-year-old daughter, Sara. James graduated with a PhD in economics and worked for the Kodak Corporation. In modern times, you wouldn't call Kodak a massive company, however, at the time, they were still at the top of the film, photography, and video market, and James worked in their finance department in Rochester. James, Kathleen, and Sara all enjoyed the company of one another and going out to the many outings that the greater Rochester area had to offer them, and Sara was only beginning to enter her preschool years. James was clearly the breadwinner of this family and did his best to provide for his wife and daughter with this thriving career. There was nothing but a bright future ahead for the Krausenecks. Kathleen was a stay-at-home mom doing her best to care for their quickly growing baby, Sara. James would always go out for work, then come home greeted with warm hugs and kisses from both of the ladies in his household. But on the late afternoon of February 19th, 1982, that's when everything changed for their family, forever. James had woken up early and kissed his wife's cheek while she continued to sleep in. He went on about his usual day at the Kodak company and then drove home, arriving at around 5 p.m. To his horror, after he got out of his car, he saw that someone had broken the window of the front door of their home and unlocked it, then forced their way into their home. He saw scattered jewelry from both his family and his wife's family all over the floor of each room of the house, along with a lot of the antique valuables, including a tea set that was somehow neatly arranged. He immediately called out his wife's name, but she didn't respond. He ran to their master bedroom and opened the door, and to his absolute bewilderment, he saw the lifeless body of his wife with an axe lodged in her skull. His daughter Sara found him. He immediately embraced her, thanking God that his daughter had survived, and then he ran to the neighbor's home to tell them what had just happened. Police arrived on the scene asking questions to James, and nothing seemed out of the ordinary from him, so they let him go. The police asked Sara if she had seen anything, and she only responded by saying, "A bad man." Police at the scene of the crime took photos of everything that they could, all the scattered jewelry, the window that was broken open to open the front door to the home, the still open garage door to the family home, everything. But they couldn't find a single shred of evidence linking a suspect to this gruesome scene. Not a single fingerprint, not a foreign body hair, no blood from the suspect, absolutely nothing. James was crying his eyes out to the police, saying he didn't know who could have done this or why. The police reviewed all of their near possible leads, including questioning James, but he was let go without suspicion. Over the years, the police conducted hundreds of interviews with the assistance of the FBI, but none of them led to any conclusive leads on where their suspect could be or who it could be. At the time, the medical examiner placed the death of Kathleen as anywhere from 4:30 in the morning to 7:30 in the morning, meaning Kathleen's murderer had 60 to 90 minutes of time to act while James was out for his day. Sara, as young as she was, had dressed herself and found a way to get food and water throughout the day without anyone's help. With Sara free to roam throughout the house at the young age of 3.5, there is also a strong possibility that she had unintentionally tampered with the crime scene. Over the years, James tried to move on, showing unconditional love to his daughter Sara and looking for a new mother to help raise her. James remarried in 1992 to a good, caring, and loving mother for his then 13-year-old daughter Sara, and his career was looking up as he became vice president for sales of Weyerhaeuser, one of the world's largest lumber mills. Life went on as normal for James and his daughter Sara, who also cared for her father. Then, in 2019, investigators arrived at James's home in Peoria, Arizona, stating that they had found a break in the case. At the ripe old age of 67, James was looking forward to hearing the news, but the investigators slowly began questioning James in his own home and then took him away in handcuffs. On November 8, 2019, James was taken to court in New York State, where charges against him were brought in the murder of his first wife, Kathleen, citing that new evidence was being introduced to the murder trial from an expert witness, Dr. Michael Baden, who was also involved in the Jeffrey Epstein trial as an expert witness and medical examiner. The original medical examiner of Kathleen's body determined that Kathleen's body temperature had decreased 1.5 degrees per hour after she had died. However, there was an electrical blanket present at the scene of the crime, and most notably, it was not determined by detectives or anyone present at the scene for that matter, whether or not that electrical blanket was turned on. Dr. Michael Baden testified that, assuming the electrical blanket was still turned on, then the body temperature of Kathleen's body would have dropped by 1 degree per every hour she was deceased after her body was discovered by Michael on the day she was murdered. And thus, this is the new evidence that was introduced to the trial. At trial, the defense argued that another convicted offender had already made a written confession to murdering Kathleen. It's time to rewind. Edward Laraby was a violent criminal and convicted predator held in the New York penal system for abuse and attempted assault. He was sentenced to 25 years for his crimes. But there's more to the story. He confessed to murdering an elementary school music teacher by the name of Stephanie Kupczynski in the year 1991. He was able to corroborate his version of events very easily because he was the maintenance person at the apartments where Stephanie had resided. Members of the maintenance team at that set of apartments had keys that would allow them unrestricted access to the apartments that the residents lived in. However, Edward was diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease and never made it to trial for confessing to the murder of Stephanie, and he has been known to lie for his own benefit. In a letter he wrote to reporters, he openly stated the following, quote, "I am what psychiatrists call a sociopath. I can assure you, for better or worse, that I am not burdened by morality, ethics, or remorse, and I certainly do not possess a conscience that needs to be cleansed." End quote. As mentioned before, Edward has been known to lie for his own personal gain. While serving his sentence for the crimes mentioned earlier, there was an occasion when he was complaining of chest pain, and then, as a result, prison guards took him to a medical facility. While he was in that medical facility, he was escorted and watched by 2 guards. Edward was then placed in a bed, then one of the guards excused himself to go to the bathroom, and when the other guard was not looking, Edward grabbed one of the medical devices nearby him and took the electrical cord and wrapped it around the other guard's neck, trying to choke him as to suffocate him and then allow Edward an opportunity to escape from the medical facility. This act, in and of itself, scored Edward an attempted murder charge and an attempted escape charge. However, the main point here is that at the time of Kathleen's death, he lived within a 5-minute drive of the Krauseneck residence, and the possibility of him murdering Kathleen is not out of the question or realm of possibilities, but Edward did say that he assaulted Kathleen's body, but there was no evidence of any such violation taking place. Edward's failure to accurately depict all of the events taking place that night from the perspective of the assailant caused investigators to dismiss his confession to the crime completely. He was hoping that his confession would be a bargaining chip to die in a place that would be more comfortable than his own prison cell. James didn't have the picture-perfect life either. There are a few plot twists to introduce here as well. Kathleen was James's first wife of 4 wives total that he married before he was incarcerated in 2019. There were also indications that secretly, Kathleen may not have been happy with their marriage. It was discovered that James had lied about being awarded a PhD, which got him into a little bit of hot water with his employment situation at Kodak, but failed to bear relevance to his marriage. If one were to concoct a theory about how this is relevant to a motive to murder his wife, it would go as follows. Kodak, as a company, hired James under the pretenses that he held a PhD and he would maintain his employment as a result. His wife, Kathleen, upon discovering that he doesn't actually own a PhD, may have realized that their income situation could potentially become much worse, and then either privately mentioned divorce with him and only him and no one else, or suggestions of marriage counseling to increase their honesty with each other may have come up. Further investigations from the relevant authorities revealed that Kathleen did make a phone call to the university from which James allegedly had obtained his PhD, and her phone call was made specifically to inquire on whether or not he actually did earn a PhD. Upon James's incarceration, Kathleen's family stated that they were waiting a long time for this day to come, and that over the years they had less and less opportunities to see their granddaughter Sara growing up. Broken families or not, good grandparents want to see their grandchildren, and I know some of you viewers out there know exactly what I'm talking about. The day following Kathleen's death, James and his daughter Sara went to Michigan to be closer to their own family, that is to say, James's side of the family. On September 23, 2022, James Krauseneck was found guilty and sentenced to 25 years to life in prison for the murder of Cathleen Krauseneck. Kathleen's surviving family gave a lot of emotional testimony to reporters after the trial had concluded.
This has affected us for 40 years that we have been dealing with pain and anguish over this man. And we saw him walk away in handcuffs today, and that's what we wanted. And I cannot thank these 2 people enough right here and the investigative team for doing this for us. This is unbelievable.
Well, I wanted to live long enough to do it. My wife passed away 4 years ago. She didn't make it. She knows.
She's here with us right now, and so is Kathy.
He died in prison of esophageal cancer less than 1 year after his sentencing. However, I don't think this is where the story fully ends. I think there are 3 key possible scenarios that could have led up to Kathleen's murder that day. In scenario 1, simply put, James was guilty all along. He staged the murder to look like an attempted burglary gone wrong and threw valuables all over the house. In scenario 2, Edward Laraby committed the murder and then started looking for all the valuables in the house. At the time of Kathleen's death, Edward was 28 years old and might have had a conscience. The noise that he was making might have woken up the then 3.5-year-old Sara, and when he heard the sound of the child or saw her face, he might have immediately ran away, not wanting to take the life of a child. And now it's time for scenario 3. Another unknown burglar committed the crime in a few heated moments, but then noticed that there was a 3-year-old child in the house and didn't have the heart to take her life. Please note that in all 3 of the scenarios mentioned, Sara is only mentioned twice, but the prosecution argued there was no damage done to any of the antique tea sets or antique china that was found in the Krauseneck residence. It is possible that young Sara could have played with these antiques, arranging them neatly, but no one can say with certainty. Last but not least, I do believe there's a solid chance of new discoveries coming up later that are introduced to the public. To this day, Sara maintains that her father died an innocent man. His 4th wife, Sara Krauseneck, also maintains his innocence. His esophageal cancer was in no way, shape, or form a surprise, meaning that he knew he was going to die before he passed away. So why didn't he give a deathbed confession of his own if he really was guilty of the crime? At the end of the day, I cannot say that I am 100% convinced beyond reasonable doubt that James Krauseneck is guilty. A lot of the evidence introduced to this case was conditional, with the only conventional science introduced being based on whether or not an electric blanket was turned on at the time that the victim was found dead in her own home. That concludes the case of the Krauseneck family and Edward Laraby. This was an extremely complicated case to tackle and try to cover from all angles, and if you all have suggestions for similar cases, please be sure to let me know in the comments section below. My deepest sympathies go to the family of the victims in this case because, guilty or not, Sara Krauseneck has lost both of her parents as of the year 2023. If you all like this video, please leave me with a thumbs up. If you think you'll be back, make sure to subscribe, and as always, please remember that every day is a new chance to see the light. Until next time, I bid you all farewell.